Dear friends, dear colleagues, I am recording this video on Wednesday, August 18, 2021. In the background, I hear the fears of thousands of Afghan human rights defenders, political activists, journalists, women human rights defenders, and professionals. For the last 20 years, they had worked tirelessly to protect and embrace human rights and universal values. Overnight, they were left alone, standing on the tarmac of an airport to confront those who tortured, killed, and raped them. Afghanistan reminds us all that in the 21st century, in 2021, civil society and independent media are on the front line of all the fight and wars for universal human rights values. Many, too many, are paying their engagement and commitment with the harshest price, with their lives, as Mr. Dink did in 2007, 40 years ago. Ours is a world characterized by repeated attacks against the idea of human rights and universal values. These attacks are often driven by populist leaders, autocrats, dictators, but not only. Democracies have become weak, and their leaders unable, unwilling to protect the values and the human rights that are at the heart of our global system. The chaos in Kabul, the thousands of Afghan civil society and journalists left behind to face the Taliban, they are also the victims of governments which have failed to put in place the necessary measures to ensure that the combatants for freedom, the combatants for human rights could be protected, including through evacuation. And yet, our world never needed more these relentless fighters for good, the successors of Hrant Dink, his sons and daughters around the world. Ours is a world of large systemic historical changes, some of which are existentialist in their implication for humankind. Climate change, pandemic, rising inequality, persistent historical discrimination, weakening of the rule of law, fighting for climate and racial justice, fighting for equality for all, no matter ethnicity, sex, gender, religion, rising to the challenges which the information technology revolution is creating. All of those cannot be conceived, cannot be done without the full involvement of a free and empowered civil society. Human rights defenders, journalists, activists able to advocate, to campaign, to organize, to create, to imagine, to write, to design, and to fight. Instead, around the world, they are assaulted by authoritarian, strong-arm, masculinist leaders, right-wing populist leaders, and they are undermined by weak democratic leaders. They confront draconian restrictions, arbitrary detention, and far worse. Many of them seek safety abroad in increasing number, but even outside their country, they are targeted by their states, including through electronic and other forms of surveillance, threats, intimidation, physical attacks, abduction, and killings. Their government's repressive efforts at home and internationally have a chilling effect over all of us, over global civil society, spreading fears, forcing self-censorship, imposing silence on too many. Turkey has certainly not escaped this global trend and in many ways highlights it particularly well. The environment for the work of Turkish human rights organizations and journalists has sharply deteriorated. They face the risk of arbitrary detention, prosecution, conviction for merely performing their human rights or media work. For instance, Özgür Türkoğan, prominent human rights defender and chairperson of Turkey's Human Rights Association, was detained on 19 of March 2021 by the police on suspicion of membership of a terrorist organization. He was released, but he's still under judicial control measures. And what about Omer Farouk Gegeroglu, a member of parliament for the People's Democratic Party? He spent 3 months in prison after his parliamentary immunity was lifted on 17th of March 2021. He was convicted of making propaganda for a terrorist organization for a couple of tweets he had shared in 2016. He was sentenced to 2.5 years imprisonment. Mr. Gegeroglu returned to parliament in July after the Constitutional Court ruled that his rights were violated. On 15th of February, another human rights defender and lawyer, Eren Keskin, was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months on grounds of membership of a terrorist organization, despite the absence of any evidence. In the Buyukada case, in July 2020, 4 of the 11 human rights defenders saw their baseless conviction by a lower court upheld by the Court of Cassation. One of the 4 is Taner Kilik, the former and now honorary chair of Amnesty International Turkey. Following an appeal, the prosecutor of the Court of Cassation asked for Taner's conviction to be upheld without justification. These cases are just some examples of the misuse of Turkey's anti-terrorism laws to criminalize legitimate, peaceful activities of human rights defenders. And this year as well, Turkey became the only country in the Council of Europe to ever leave an international convention, the Istanbul Convention, claiming it is being used to normalize homosexuality, incompatible with Turkey's social and family values. That disastrous decision has left millions of women and girls without the gold standard protection in the fight against violence against women. It is against this backdrop that Turkey's valiant civil society organizations like the Arandik Foundation, the Human Rights Association, women's rights and feminist organizations, and all those who bear the brunt of those attacks, they fight back. And in their response, they can count on Amnesty International solidarity. As a global human rights organization, we consider this our foremost duty to speak up together when many may be prevented from doing so, to speak truth to power, no matter the size of power. We stand by your side, shoulder to shoulder, bringing to you the power of our global movement and millions of supporters. We stand by your side to end impunity for human rights violations, to demand justice, to demand equality in Turkey and anywhere else in the world. Thank you very much.